Guy Pratt is a session bass legend. He's been the touring bass player for Pink Floyd since 1987 and recorded with other pop legends such as Michael Jackson, Madonna, Bryan Ferry, Robbie Robertson and many, many more. As well as his hugely successful bass career, Guy has also dabbled in acting. He's a stand-up comic and author of the hilarious and insightful My Bass and Other Animals. This interview is absolutely hilarious in itself as Guy leads you through some of the great anecdotes from his career while providing an insight into how he came to be a first-call session musician for so many great acts. So let's join Ellen as she sits down to talk bass with the one and only Guy Pratt.
Hello and welcome to the Talkingbass podcast with me, your host Ellen O'Reilly, and my guest, Guy Pratt.
Hello. Oh, do I have to do that as well?
Yeah, why not? Let's do a Mexican wave. Right, so yeah, obviously, Guy has been a top session bass player. He's played with absolutely everyone in the universe: Madonna, Michael Jackson, Pink Floyd, and a host of others, loads and loads and loads. He's also
the great and the near great.
Absolutely, like. So, Guy, come here. Tell me, how did it all start for you? You know, how did the whole music thing happen?
Well, I had my sort of epiphany. I mean, I was into music when I was a kid, but not. I was more into the technology. I was obsessed with cassette players, which was the thing then. So I used to spend all my school holidays mooching around the Sony showroom in Regent Street, which felt like it was a set from a James Bond film. All this incredible electronic stuff, which now, of course, is incredibly hokey. It was like big radio receivers and turntables and cassette players, and So for me, it was more when I got given a Sony TC66 cassette player as a Christmas present, and so for me, music was more stuff to listen to on my cassette player than the other way around. You know, it was the medium rather than the message I was interested in. So it was things. But I had things like I was really into Bowie, but then it would be Tubular Bells and the soundtrack to 2001: A Space Odyssey. It was more. Yeah, it was. I guess it was more audiophile than anything else, and I'd loved Slade and stuff like that. And then it was when I was on a family holiday in Holyhead. We used to go up to Holyhead and go sailing. Yeah, it wasn't great. Well, it was great. The holidays were great. Sailing wasn't. It was like child abuse, frankly. And and I had an older cousin who sort of bullied me into smoking. And the first time I sort of properly smoked a cigarette, it made me feel sick, and I went upstairs to lie down in his bedroom, and I was laid down on the bed. And when I sort of came round a bit, I saw he had a cassette player. Whoa, cassette player! So I just hit play, and it was Who's Next, and Barbara O'Reilly started, and it was just what, and I just never heard anything. I'd never heard anyone mean anything that much. Not even quite sure what he meant. But it was just that, and then I turned it over, and that's right. I listened to the next song, which was Getting in Tune, and then for some reason I turned it over, being a cassette, and of course, because of the length of that was the exact start of Won't Get Fooled Again, and it was like, all right, I'm done, and it's like everything I'd ever thought or cared about was out the window. It's like that's what I want to do. So obviously I wanted a guitar, so I then spent months pleading with my parents to get me an electric guitar, and of course my mum said, "Oh no, darling, why don't you get a nice Spanish one?" And I was like, Spanish? Fuck that. It was the electric bit I was interested in, you know. A toaster would have been nearer what I was after than a Spanish guitar, frankly. So I asked for a bass guitar, and even I really didn't know what the difference was or what it was or anything. And so I got this thing, and it was this great big, and it was horrible, really. I mean, it just wasn't that sexy or exciting, and I didn't have an amp or anything. But then the brilliant thing was, when I got back to school because my birthday is right, so this was in the Christmas holidays. But when I got back to school, about 3 other kids had got electric guitars. And rather than being jealous, I suddenly realised, but hang on a minute, if any of them wanted to be a band, they needed me, right? So I had my pick, and the guy I picked, the guy I got in with, was actually someone who was a year above. It's always a year above, isn't it? Everyone you want to hang out with is a year above. And there was this one guy who I always thought was, incredibly cool and be desperate to be mates with anyway, who was this guy called Martin Glover. And so we started this band called A Nice Pair of Three, all original material. Martin wrote all the songs. And Martin would then leave school and change his name to Youth and go on to be the legendary bass player, producer, composer that we know.
Wow.
So that's how I started. Also at school, his best mate was this guy Alex Patterson, who then went on to start the Orb.
Amazing.
So, yeah, that was it. And the funny thing is, we were actually pretty much. Now, there was one other person I didn't really know. There was one other person called Lance Ellington who wanted to be, who apparently fancied himself as a singer. And the extraordinary thing is that most schools have like hundreds of kids who go, yeah, I'm going to start a band, I'm going to start a band. And the thing is, at our school, as far as I'm aware, there are only 4 of us who really wanted to do music. And we all pulled it off. Everyone. You know, it was like an actually eminently sensible career choice.
That's amazing. That's like a magic school. It's kind of like Ealing College of Art. I mean, for some reason, everyone came out of it. Freddie Mercury came out of there, and
Pete Townsend.
Pete Townsend, and a whole other cool heads all came out of this one zone.
Yeah,
you know? It's weird.
Yeah, but the only person we had, the only person in the school's history up to then was one of the Glitter Band.
All right.
Not even sure which one. But yes, then we've got actually also my year mate, one of my year mates was Andrew Adonis. So there you go.
Amazing.
Trivia fans.
So what about what was it about bass that you fell in love with, like, and who were your early
Nothing.
heroes?
I mean, nothing. I didn't fall in love with the bass at all for ages. But I had, the good thing is I had it, and my dad had bought me it, and then I don't want to get schmaltz, but then my dad died. He'd also given me a copy of Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, which is something that I forgot about till years later, which then became very spooky. But it was this weird thing, and my dad had given it to me. It was my last connection with my dad, so I was going to learn to play it. And that's what I was going to do. If he'd still been around, I probably would have ended up going to college and doing something sensible. But there you go. So yeah, that was it. I just decided I was going to get good at it. I decided that what I was going to do, and I didn't, and it was more a question of I learnt to love it, because I wasn't even really into listening to. It was a couple of years before I got into kind of all the cool music, because I was listening to rock. I was only interested in rock and roll. I thought kind of soul and disco wasn't really that, was schmaltzy. I didn't realise that's actually where all the action was. It was then reggae when I discovered. I mean, the first time I think I really got into it was when I discovered Aston Family Man Barrett, with Bob Marley.
Yeah.
And it's just suddenly thought, because what's amazing about that is because this was at the time of fusion and everything, and everyone was talking about Stanley Clarke and Jaco Pastorius, and you just go, yeah, I can't do that, and I still can't do that. And the thing is, I don't want to do that. I love that people do that, and I very much enjoy hearing people do that, but I don't want to do that. I think if I learned how to do all that, that would actually spoil the stuff that I do. Do you know what I mean? I think that you do. Well, you can be too. Technically, you can be too good. For a certain type of music. That's why, I mean, Jacko would not have been a great fit for Pink Floyd. It's very simple, In the same way as that's why, even though he is one of my absolute idols and heroes, I think it's better that I got the Floyd gig than Tony Levin did.
Yeah.
Because Tony Levin would always be Tony Levin, whereas I became that guy associated with Pink Floyd and, gave it my heart and soul and everything. Whereas he would always have one foot in Peter Gabriel and, and it wouldn't be the same. So, but yeah, also there was a thing, you've got to bear in mind that that timing-wise, I was very, very lucky, because then with punk, the whole idea of, punk came along, and suddenly the whole idea of musicianship didn't really matter. And suddenly the coolest guy in the band was the bass player. Suddenly you had Jean-Jacques Bonnel and Simo with the Clash, and suddenly these were the guys, they were so cool. And but then with the new romantic thing, then everything sort of, which coincided with the birth of hip hop, and suddenly we were all into funk and disco and all that stuff. And then so my salad days were the 80s, which was the best decade to be a bass player, absolutely, and the worst decade to be a guitarist. It was like, we owned their ass then, frankly. It really was, it used to be, the bass stopped being the poor cousin. It was like you wanted to be the bass player in the band. He was the guy.
So what was it like after? So once you started, you were playing in, like, you had punk bands and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was in a mod band, which was a terrible, because that was obviously always going to be a cul-de-sac. That was clearly never going to go anywhere. It was, but I liked it because I thought it meant it was like being a punk, but you got to be smart.
Oh,
and
right.
because I'm just not much as I'd like to think of I'm a rebel. I'm really not. I'm actually incredibly conformist. So being a mod suited my sensibilities very well. Plus, there was a lot of Motown involved, and by that point, I'd realised that the Jameson was kind of where the action was at. So yeah, and the annoying thing is, actually, the annoying thing is that our guitarist's brother used to. This was my first band, Speedball, this mod band. Our guitarist's brother used to occasionally do the cloakroom at Blitz, and he used to invite me, and I was like, no, thanks. And you start to think, fuck, why didn't you go? Why? You know, I could have been in Ultravox or something, you know.
So what happened after Speedball? Was that when Icehouse came calling?
No, it was a couple of years between. I then sort of I got kicked out of home because I was just moping about, and I went and squatted, lived in squats around Notting Hill, which is what everyone did back then, and I just had various little gigs. Because I was best because I lived just opposite my mate Youth, right, who was then in Killing Joke, who you know, amazing, terrifying. They had a record deal and everything, and they were really frightening, and so I used to hang around with them a lot. And then they had this weird split up where jazz had a vision to do with the end of the world. I mean, everything was very. You've got to remember the early '80s. Everything was the end of the world. I mean, all our dreams were mushroom cloud shaped. You know, you had Maggie and Ronnie in their evil empires. People forget it was very. You know, didn't have the terrorist threat. We had literal World War III threats. Very, very real. There were missiles pointing at everyone, and so he'd had this vision about an island at the end of the world. So he'd fucked off to Iceland, and just as they were having their first hit, and they got and then suddenly Geordie the guitarist went off to Iceland, and it turned out that they're basically trying to get Youth out of the band. So he took Big Paul the drummer, and started this band called Brilliant, and which was originally 2 drummers and Youth and me and 2 bass players, which is a terrible idea, right? A terrible idea. We didn't even have a guitarist, just had a singer. And I was doing that, but at the same time, I got asked to stand in. There was a bunch of sort of posh, trendy guys I'd met around Notting Hill called Funkopolitan, who were very, very cool. And they were very much into the burgeoning new sort of hip hop funk scene. And their bass player was Tom Dixon, right? The guy who went on to become the great furniture designer. But he was a bass player, and he broke his arm. And so I got asked to stand in for him on their UK tour. So that was the first kind of proper UK tour I did. So I was just getting funny little gigs like that. And then, yeah, the Brilliant thing didn't work out. Yeah, then I don't know what happened with Brilliant. I ended up just not doing that. And then I was in a splinter group called the Children of Seven with JC and Chris Payne from the Members of Sound of the Suburbs fame. And that was the first, and we got a single out on Stiff Records called Solidarity, which is a sort of weird, ironic disco thing. And then I got the coolest of all gigs, God rest his soul, I got the gig with Sylvain from the New York Dolls, who was just adorable. And he took me to Paris and to Stockholm, and that was just amazing. And also it was great because it gave me total punk credibility for the rest of my life. I can go and do the crappiest gigs ever, but I'll always have played for Sylvain. So, and then the Icehouse gig came about because Icehouse had been Flowers. There was a hugely successful band in Australia, and they got a massive American record deal, and then they sort of split up. The management had said, "I think the best thing for you blokes is to split up. You clearly hate each other." And Ivor Davis was the main talent, and then because they were so sort of new wave and pretentious, they wanted, and in Australia everything was still very meat and 2-veg rock and roll, and they wanted and what could be more pretentious than an English bass player? And their manager had a mate who worked at Virgin Records, a guy called, I've forgotten his name. But anyway, the thing is, I used to hang around the Virgin offices a lot because just trying to blag free promo copies of records to go and sell and stuff. And then, so their manager called up Virgin and said, "Listen, we're looking for, do you know any bass players? We need someone young, and who basically won't cost anything." I can't remember his name. I know him so well. This is a real old person thing that's happened to me. He said to the manager, "Yes, actually, I do know one bloke, and frankly, I could do with getting him out of my office." So I got asked to audition for this band, and then was flown off to Australia, where to be in this band that was a huge pop group, on telly and hits and girls chasing you down the road and everything, and it was brilliant. But what was really brilliant about that was that I did this 3-month tour with them, and then came home and was just another twat sitting in a laundrette. Which is actually really, really good for you. And I used to think, God, if you're Simon Le Bon or someone, you could really do with that. Just go home and just be a twat, just be no one. It's very, very good for you. So there you go. And then I was with them for a couple of years, which was really great times. Made two albums with them, one of which I would say is a great lost gem of the 80s, a thing called Measure for Measure. And then we did this then we got our support Bowie, and then on the Bowie tour we did these German festivals. And on these German festivals, Robert Palmer was on the bill, and he spotted me. He invited me out to the Bahamas, and we ended up writing a song together, which then he then got asked to do the Power Station album. My song got on the Power Station album. I got snuck in to New York to play on it. Then I met Bernard Edwards. Bernard Edwards then asked Robert to get me to play on his album, the Addicted to Riptide, the Addicted to Love album, because he liked the look of me. And then through Icehouse, we'd been using Rhett Davis, Bryan Ferry's producer. He then stole me from Icehouse, said you'd be perfect for Bryan. So then I'm playing with Bryan Ferry. And then through that, Johnny Marr comes through the door. And then Johnny and I fall in love with each other. And he drags me off to go and play with Kirsty MacColl and play on loads of other sessions. And it was just, I had nothing to do with anything. I had no plan. I had no, literally, as I said, a career isn't something I had. It's something I did. I just careered wildly from one thing to the other. And, basically drunk the whole time as well. I mean, it's extraordinary.
That is one hell of an explosion of a career. Like, there's so many people who would kill for all that, I mean...
Yeah, no, and I would have killed. Luckily, I didn't have to kill anyone, either. I did it all by just getting to be really nice to people.
And funny.
I never crawled over anyone for a gig. I never, the only time I ever did that was when, after a year and a half working with the Dream Academy, playing clubs and stuff like that with them, after they'd had their hit, when it came to doing their second album, Hugh Padgham was brought in to produce. And of course, he brings in all of Peter Gabriel's band. He brings in Tony Levin and Jerry Marotta, Larry Fast, and these guys are my heroes. And my logical sort of reaction should have been, oh yeah, no, fair enough, can't argue with that. But it's funny, but it wasn't. I was like, actually no, Tony Levin isn't playing bass on this album. I'm playing bass on this album. This is my fucking album. And I didn't feel bad about it, because I was thinking, well, Tony just goes and says yes to 2 of the 79 gigs he's probably going to say no to. So so I did actually knock Tony out of the way for that. But it's true, but that was my gig, So yeah, that's the only time I ever kind of crawled over anybody, and that's hardly crawling over anyone anyway.
Exactly.
Tony,
exactly.
We're mates. It's fine.
I mean, how old were you when the whole ice?
Actually, the historical record is slightly wrong, because it was made out because there was always a big thing of ours of 19-year-old Guy Pratt. And I thought, yeah, so I've always had the thing in my head, yes, I was 19. And I always went along with it. Yeah, it's amazing I was only 19. And I suddenly thought, hang on, it's 1982. I wasn't 19, I was 20. But of course, it's the difference between being a teenager and not being a teenager. So I was actually 20 when that started. And then that whole mad period, which sort of culminated in me getting the Pink Floyd gig, was 5 years.
Wow. That's just insane. All right, so you're plucked from obscurity in London, right? Right?
Yeah.
20 years old. And off to Australia, massive band, and then one thing leads to another, like, not in a sexy way, but in a good musical way. And then
in a sexy way as well, quite often.
I know, I read your book, Guy, you filth bag. So, 5 years later, Pink Floyd, one of the biggest bands in the world. Mental. So, right, and then also meeting all the heroes, because I know you love Bernard Edwards and the disco stuff. Like, what was it like meeting him? Was he sound?
He was more than sound. I mean, the first time I met him was when Robert, because it was to play on this song, Go to Zero, the one I'd written. It had this incredibly simple bass line. I'm not plugged in, but. Right, it was that.
Yeah.
And Robert was so obsessive about articulation and everything had to be literally just so. And John Taylor could play it fine, but he couldn't play it like that. So I was flown over to New York and snuck in to the power station to do this sort of, I wasn't going to be on the record, but I had to do a sort of colour by numbers thing for John to play along with. So, and I had to go into the studio, and it was just Robert and Bernard Edwards, and I was, I was 22, and I was just so scared. And I had this thing when I plugged in to start, and I started playing. I had this automatic thing I always used to do, probably still do, that when I start playing to get a sound, I play My Feet Keep Dancing by Chic, and I completely forgot who was in the room. And I just started playing My Feet Keep Dancing, and suddenly this big voice goes, "Shut up, motherfucker! Make me feel old." And it was Bernard. Do you know what? The one really, really sweet thing, really lovely thing that I got to do in later life was one thing was at the time. I said to Nard, right? I said, "No, I've just got to tell you, I am so scared right now, right? I'm so terrified being in this room with you. Who, if anyone, would do that to you? Who would make you feel the way I do right now?" And without a second's hesitation, he went, "Chuck Rainey." Went, "Whoa, okay." And I forgot about that for years until a few years ago, I was at a Warwick base camp thing in Germany. And I got to meet Chuck Rainey, which was, yeah, of course, yeah. And I met Chuck Rainey. And I said, "Did you know Bernard Edwards?" And he said, "No, man." I said, "No, I love that cat, love his, love him. But no, I never got to meet him." And I told him that story. I got to tell him that that's what Bernard Edwards said to me about him.
Oh,
and he'd
that's
never
amazing.
heard it. And yeah, that was so nice.
What was his reaction?
It was just like, "Oh, well, what could it be? You punched me."
He cried and embraced you.
Yes, exactly. No, but that was a really nice thing to be able to do, to pass on. But then, when Nard, Nard got rid of Robert's band, except for his drummer Donnie Wynn, for when he produced Robert's album, and brought in all his super hot, the New York guys. He brought in Eddie Martinez and Jeff Bova, is it Jeff Bova? And Tony Thompson. But he said to Robert, "Hey, that English kid of yours, I like him. Bring him in." And I was like, "Oh," so I got flown out, and I didn't bring a bass with me. He said, "Don't bring a bass." So I turned up, but come to spot. I mean, this is so intimidating. And I haven't got a bass. I haven't got a bass. He goes, "Go on in that case. Thought you might like that." And I opened it up. There's the Music Man.
Wow.
It's that one. So that's what I play.
Oh my God. How did it feel like? What was it like?
It was mad because he was so sweet. He knew. I mean, I was way out of my depth. I shouldn't really have been there. It's like it's fine me working, but putting me in a room with those guys, it was kind of. I was, they're all up there. So I must, Bernard ended up playing most of the bass. I mean, I ended up on one song on the album, but although I'd played on quite a lot of things that didn't make it to the album. But Bernard used to take me into the games room and sit me down and give me little lessons, which was, but in a really and I suddenly realised that could have actually really fucked me up. That could have really thrown me off, because he clearly felt I needed help. Oh. But it actually wasn't. There was something so kind and paternal about him where, he clearly thought, he clearly, in the same way as, people say, but when you meet Paul McCartney knows exactly what it's like to be Paul McCartney. And he works so hard at kind of trying to put you at ease about the fact, he spent his life being Paul McCartney. He knows what it's like for everyone. And, Bernard had that same thing of not like, "Yeah, I'm great" or anything. It was just like, "Look, I'm Bernard Edwards and you're a young bass player. Obviously, this is going to be doing your nut." So, and he just could not have been nicer. Funnily enough, I spoke to John Bon Jovi for something the other day. And he said this because he had this thing where he used to get demo time at the power station in the glory day. He was there when it was all going on. And he said, you could tell the people who are really going all the way because they were always really, really nice. He said, Bernard and Niall, they were in there every day and they're always like, "Hey, kid, how's your demos going? How's it, blah, blah." Apparently even Mick used to be really nice to it, and Bowie, everyone was always really, really nice. He said, "There are people who are assholes to me, but you wouldn't know their name."
Ah.
Well, and it's a great thing that Billy Corgan said when we interviewed him. He said the thing is when when you have your mountain of success, right? When you're coming down the other side of your mountain of success, the terrible thing is you don't realize you're coming down the mountain. You think this is a dip.
Actually, when you were talking about like how you felt meeting Bernard Edwards, right? You're going to get all blushy now, right? But you are my favorite bass player of all time, right? And yeah, all right, whatever. But you are, and I met you.
I can't think why. I mean, I genuinely can't think why. But thank you. Oh. I know.
Don't
But,
start me. I'll go on. But I'll tell you, honestly, you're an absolute.
But that's
absolute
thank you. That is genuinely thrilling, and thank you, because you're a
Yeah.
great bass player. I know.
Oh.
That, so.
I'm so glad this is recorded.
Why? No, it's true.
Made my life. But no, honestly, God, like, I mean, massive fan. Like all the records you played on, and the way you play, like your sound, it sounds like you, and that's what's so cool about it. But it's not like when you were talking about like the over technical thing. I'm not into that either. I like feel and groove and ripping it up, but in a tasteful, cool way. Like when you rip it, it's cool. It's not too much. It's not. I just love your style, you know. And your sound, and I went and bought 5 OC2 pedals because of you.
You've got what?
I bought like 5 OC2 pedals because of you. Like, I was like, I need one more and one more because they're very hard to find.
Mine's just broken, funnily enough. I don't know. It's not working for some reason. I don't know what's going on. But but the sound thing is very funny, isn't it? Because I know I have a sound, and there's different sounds I use, but I know I have a sound. But the thing is, and there are some people who go, what's the secret of your sound? I go, well, I do this and I do that, and it's very important to do that. I don't know. I don't really know. Obviously, I tend to I tend to use all. I like a 2 pickup bass. When I can, it's all bridge pickup and half to 2/3 neck pickup, and tone usually full up. But and it's other than that, I can't tell you how I get. All I know is when I'm playing, if I'm in a studio, and it's like, no, that's not it. No, that's not it. Yes, that's it. But I don't know exactly how I get there.
Yeah. But it's all in your, like, it's in your hands. It's coming out of your hands. I mean, it's your touch. It's your feel. It's
okay, I've got the best example I can ever give you of that. I've always had that. Not me. I mean, I've always had the thing about people, of it being in people's fingers. Years ago, I did a piece of film music for this film, Hackers, and I blagged David Gilmour to come, and I'd managed to get it because I'd stupidly said I can get David to play on it, and then had to get him to come and play on it. And he came, and it was sort of around my studio at home, and we'd just come off the road. David wasn't up to it much. I said, "Would you come and play on this sort of demo I'm doing that might be for a film, might more?" And he was just like, "Yeah, all right." And so he came down. It was when he was playing his Red Strat, and I remember he came down the road, literally carrying, didn't have a case or anything, literally just carrying this Red Strat in his hand. It was on the back seat of the car. And so I'd rented in all these amps. Like, I thought, what is David like? I've got a really nice little Fender Champ. I've got a little Vox. I've got everything. And I came and said, okay, what do you want to play for? And then I had this Korg, 90s Korg guitar effects unit that I used to use, right? And he went, oh, that. I was like, really? Yeah, and he plugs in, goes, whoa! And it's like, fucking hell. And I remember, because I had an engineer, and he was just like, you can see the hairs on the back of his neck. It's like, that's David Gilmour, right? I mean, it's absolutely. And he plays, does about 3 takes of this thing, and then goes, all right, can I go now? Okay, yeah, great, thanks, David. And he gets up and he leaves. And I went, right, nobody touch anything. Don't touch anything. Because I got exactly the same Strat. I've got the 80s, the 82, 62 reissue with the EMGs in it. I've got that Strat. I've got his settings in there. It's like, it's all here. I've got Gilmour in the bottom. Right, nobody move. And I very gingerly went and picked up my guitar, plugged it in. There. Nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it.
That's it, man. That's it.
Yeah.
Oh, as you've got some great stories about the old Dave Gilmour. Or as in Ireland we call him Dahi Gilmour. Because
Dahi
is Gaelic for Dave.
It's
I used to be like,
it's David. You can't call him Dave.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, David, yeah, but like Dahi is like David in Gaelic,
Dahi. He might like that. I'll try that.
Dahi, yeah, I'll text you the spelling. Like it's very funny.
I've got an old friend, Magnus Fines, who's a music composer I work with. He's one of my dearest friends. So I used to work with a lot, and he said he suddenly got plumped when he was about 7 and got plumped in a school in the middle of nowhere in Ireland. And came the first and said, right, what's your name? He said, Magnus Fines. No, it's not, it's Manus Feeney. Next.
That's it. It's your Dahi O'Gilmour, that's it. But yeah, no, but back to how you felt about about how Bernard felt about Chucky. Yeah, I feel like that about you. Like for first years, I met you years ago when you were doing, the stand-up for My Bass and Other Animals, and you were in Ireland like a million years ago, me and my sister. And I still have the book that you signed. This is me being all fanboy. There it is, look.
Or girl even. What did I say? To my darling.
To my darling. I know, yeah. Fresh.
Yeah, clearly made. Yeah, so yeah, a bit forward that. Frankie. I apologise.
That's all right. It's all right. And then
Which was that? Where was that in Ireland? I went to
That was
Ireland
at
a few
the.
times.
It would be called the Abbey now, but back then it was called the HQ Hot Press Hall of Fame, Abbey Street, Dublin, like right off O'Connell Street, big tall building, and you were doing stand up there.
Was it during the comedy festival?
I don't know if it was the comedy festival, but I dragged my
Was it
sister
Dublin?
along.
I love. Oh, okay.
And it was funny, like, because she had, like, I used to drag my sister, because I didn't have a boyfriend at the time, so I just drag my sister around to everything. And she would just go, but she didn't have a boyfriend either. So we would just, but it was stuff that she wasn't interested in. And I was like, right, I'm going to this thing. It's a comedy thing. It'll be great. And then she was like, tell me more about it. I was like, I'm not going to tell her, because as soon as I say the word bass guitar or bassist or anything, she'll be like, I'm not going, like, because she's zero. My dad used to say, oh, Ellen plays the bass and Linda plays the radio, you know? So
That's so Irish.
Exactly. So she was like, no, I'm not going. No, I don't know. So I didn't say anything. And I brought her. And then she saw my bass and she was like, for fuck's sake, what is this? What is this? And she was wetting herself, loving it. And then me and you went up and I was afraid to go near you. And she just like was pushing you. And you actually gave me a hug and a kiss. And I was absolutely delighted. And then I remember...
okay.
Yeah, and then years later...
Well, you're a very attractive girl. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
So years later, then suddenly I start doing stuff and I move to London and I'm playing at the bass show and then, like, okay, there's all these famous bass players, heroes, like,
No, I remember
around.
you doing that. I remember you being in the entrance hallway.
Yeah, and I was doing all this chord stuff.
I remember.
Music band at the time. And I was doing all this stuff, and no matter who walked by, I kept playing. I just ignored them. Right, that's Yolanda. I'll just ignore her. Okay, there's Lawrence. I'll ignore them. Whatever. And then you walked by, and I just stopped, and I was like, sorry about that. On the mic, my favourite bass player in the world just walked by, and then you came back, and you were like, you're my favourite bass player here. And I was like, literally wet myself. This is brilliant. and then years of wetting myself around you, and now I'm like, oh, we're like mates, it's grand. But still, it was a bit like that for a number of years. So wearing incontinence pants, talking to Guy Pratt is now my thing.
Listen, but I was like that with David for years. You know, it took me years to stop. Yeah, to stop going. Oh my God, it's David Gilmour. You know, and he'd been, you know, and he was a friend. He's been a great friend for years. He's, you know, and he's been really, really good to me as a proper mate. And yeah, but it's took me a long time to get past the fact that, you know, when you're friends with someone who was on your bedroom wall when you were a kid. I don't know if I was on your bedroom wall. I doubt it. Not many posters.
No,
the only thing with being a sideman, you don't get to be in many posters. But you see, bringing your sister to my gig, see, that's the thing. So she is what I would call the perennial girlfriend. Because the one thing, when I was doing my comedy, for all the reasons exactly that you just mentioned, was that I was always aware that a lot of my audience was going to be girlfriends, wives, who've been dragged along to something. And so I was very, very conscious of trying to do something. I tried to throw bones for the musos, but then stuff that was funny for anyone. You know, that's the idea. So,
and it was, 'cause she absolutely loved it.
Well, there you go.
It was brilliant. Yeah, no, I love it in the book. Like, again, my Based on Other Animals. When you have that, it's all hilarious, right? And then you get to the chapter, train sets, and it's like, it's not for girls. And I was like, really?
Did I say that's actually terribly sexist of me?
I'm only messing.
But actually, it's true. Let's be honest. You know, it's mainly.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's like 80% lads and you know, talking about the winding of a pickup, and I'm like, I love playing bass, obviously, but I can't. I getting down to the nitty gritty about like the 1973 wound. This one was wound in March, and this
I spent years thinking you needed to know all that stuff, and realised I was actually pretending to be interested. I mean, I've got this great big super posh pedal board, and I love it. And I love having my big posh. But again, all of them, it's just like I get down and go, that. Yeah, there it is. That works. And I don't, you know, the great thing about getting older is you don't have to pretend to be interested in things you're not. You know, it was like there's a very funny thing because when I started, I was reading every book I could about music and musicians and everything, and like Les Paul and people, and there was always this thing like the thing about Les Paul and various engineers. The thing was like they got a tape recorder, and the first thing they did was take it apart, right? But that was obviously because they had some sort of technical inherent knowledge that they would use to then explore this tape recorder and turn it into something else. So then I had some sort of distant uncle, sort of great uncle died, and I got left a tape recorder. So the first thing I did was took it apart. But I have no inherent technical knowledge. All I had was a tape recorder in bits that was never going back together again. So all I did was just break a perfectly good tape recorder. No, I can't. Listen, I'm scared. I'm still scared shitless of adjusting a truss rod. I've no idea. I tried it on my Spectre and nearly broke the fucking thing. I'm terrified of anything like that. I can change. I still, after all these years, when I change my strings, I still get the length wrong when I clip it. So it's always just too short to loop it round and just too long so that you get 2 or 3 winds on it. You'd think I'd know. I mean, admittedly, it's quite a lot of different basses, so they're all different lengths. But you'd think I'd know by now that the E string needs to be clipped here and the A string needs to be clipped there. But I don't. In the same way as I still can't pack, I still can't, I mean, I've spent my life living out of suitcases and I love it. And I'm so fastidious about it. I mean, I spend weeks organising my toilet bag, right? My wash bag is but I still don't know what to take. You'd think I would, and it just doesn't go in. Every time you get someone go, oh yeah, no, I shouldn't have brought that, really should have brought that, really should have brought that.
Yeah.
And the next time I go out on tour, it'll be the same. I'll get to the first hotel. Yeah, I shouldn't have brought that. Really should have brought that. So there you go. There are some things you just never learn.
Yeah, you got to roll it into little balls apparently. But I'm the same. I'm like, I never wear this normally. Why would I bring this here?
But that used to be the thing. But it's that because I'm away, I'm going to wear it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I've actually still got sort of beloved items of clothing, which basically live in my wardrobe or my suitcase. Never wear them. But it's always in my wardrobe, and I always go, no, I'll take that because I'll wear it. So it just goes from the wardrobe to the suitcase, and then stays in the suitcase, and then goes back to the wardrobe, and then goes back into the suitcase.
So those 5 years between like Ice House and Pink Floyd, and you were just powering through all these amazing artists. So after Robert Palmer and all that, who was next? Before
It was Bryan Ferry. Bryan Ferry.
Bryan Ferry.
That was just heavenly, especially because Bryan had just put out Boys and Girls. He just had Slave to Love, and he was so cool at the time, so cool and so hip, and so just everything about him was just he was. And so I got the gig playing with him, and what was fantastic was because I got Nick because Rhett Davis, his producer, because Bryan Ferry albums take forever. I mean, they sound it, right? You can hear they take years of intense, but and they do sound like it. But the thing is, the way Bryan was working at that time was that every time he had an idea, he'd fly to New York, book the power station, get Marcus Miller and kind of, Ndugu Chancellor or whatever, or Andy Newmark. And and the record company going, this is just unsustainable. And so Rhett's thing was he just thought he wanted Bryan to have a little London team, so he could they had this cheap little studio in Chelsea, the record company owned, and so they found Chester Kamen, this guitarist, and then myself, and they put the two of us together, and we were just left in this studio. And Bryan would come in and out, and then the rest of the time it was just us messing about with all this amazing equipment and everything, and it was just heaven, And I adored Chester and still do, and so and then suddenly all these incredible people coming out. That's how I got to know David Gilmour, because David used to come in and out, and then Johnny Marr turned up, and then, it was just fantastic. And then we moved into Air Studios, and the funny thing was, I stopped, and then. The funny thing is, then the problem that Bryan had was, he really, really wanted to hit in America, and he'd never had hits in America because American songs need big choruses, and Bryan Ferry songs don't have big choruses. So they think, okay, so Madonna has just had her biggest album. She's just put True Blue out, right? Co-written and produced by Pat Leonard. So it's like, let's get Pat Leonard in. Pat was doing the same sort of thing as me and Johnny Marr. All of us were just going, whoa, yeah, come on, give me. Johnny was bouncing off the walls, just playing guitar for everyone on the back of the Smiths. And then Pat was just writing and recording with everyone he could. So it's like, Bryan Ferry, I'll do that. So they start working together. So that's how I met Pat Leonard. And, and he liked the look of me, and so then I ended up going and doing all the Madonna stuff and Toy Matinee and everything with him after. So it's everything was leading to, and none of it was ever planned. You could never see, you never knew. I'd walk into the studio that day, and that's the day that Pat Leonard turns up, and then that's going to change my life for the next 10 years. So
Amazing.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that was, and because the funny thing was I stopped working on it. It moved on to another phase. Like they'd done all the recording and everything. And I don't know what Brian was doing. He was then fiddling about for ages. So I and then months went past. And then I went off and did the Pink Floyd thing. And I remember being halfway through the Pink Floyd tour. I remember exactly where I was. I was in St. Louis. I remember walking into a record shop and there was Bête Noire by Bryan Ferry. I was like, what? He finished it. And it never occurred to me that Brian would actually finish this album. I thought, no, I thought what happened was that I go off on tour with Pink Floyd for a year, come back, and then go back and carry on working on Brian's sort of eternal album. And it was finished. And what was really, really annoying was that the musicians were just listed in alphabetical order. Not who played on what song or whoever. So someone who came in for an afternoon and did Duck Call got exactly the same prominence as me, who'd spent a year and a half slogging away at it. So that was slightly annoying.
Right. Like a Prayer, we've got to talk about it, right? Because that's like your quintessential song.
Oh, do you know what? Yes, go on. Phrase it.
But I have to
Phrase your
say,
question.
right, well, to be honest with you, like, whenever people have asked, like, what is your favourite pop song of all time? If you had to pick one, I would always say Like a Prayer. It's just a perfect pop song, isn't it? Like,
no, it is. I mean, it's, yeah, and I had no idea at the time. And yeah, it is, and I'm prouder to be on that than probably anything I've ever done, because it's one of the most important records of the last of the history of pop music, for so many reasons. And funnily enough, because I looked up the Wikipedia entry on Like a Prayer last night, and there's quite a lot of stuff involving me in it. And what's funny is someone's clearly read an interview with me at some point, and it's just gone through this insane Chinese whisper shredders, and it's just all this nonsense, which bears no relation to what actually happened. And it's really weird, and it implies I have a completely different relationship with Madonna that I had, also, But I'm very happy to tell you the straight story. Well, what was amazing? It was right at the end of the Floyd tour, and I mean, I was burnt out by then. I basically should have gone straight to rehab at the end, or on holiday at least. I didn't even do that. And that tour was so long, and I'd been living in this insane bubble. And the idea of what the hell do you go back to after that? And we were playing, I think it was in Washington DC, one of the last shows. And Pat Leonard came to the gig and he said, "What are you doing after this tour?" I said, "I've got no idea." And he said, "Do you fancy playing on the Madonna record?" I was like, "Fuck! Yes! God, yes!" I thought, wow. I know, because whenever I got things like that with Brian, I always thought these things were just little flukes. And, the idea that it's like you go from Pink Floyd to Madonna, it's kind of like, no, you live here. It's like, I don't live there, surely. And then, so I get back home, and then, amazing, then Pat calls me up and says, "Who do you want to play drums?" What? It's like, I literally get to pick my drummer on the fucking Madonna record? It's like, this is nuts. And I immediately, so the guy I was in love with at the time was David Palmer. Because before the Floyd thing, I was going to start a band with Johnny Marr and David Palmer. 3 of us were going to start a band. They ended up playing together in The. So I said, "Well, I'm David Palmer." So I went, "Okay." I was like, "Fuck, this is insane." So David's going to come out and play drums, which is great because that makes me feel comfortable. I've got my guy on board. But then like a week before we're meant to be going out, David cancels. I think because he had the gig or something. And it was like, what? So apparently in the studio, Madonna loses her shit. Goes, "Why the fuck are we getting this guy? I didn't want him. It's only because you want him. And if he can't even fucking pick a drummer, why the?" And so I'm fired. That's it. I've lost again. Pat calls me up and he's going, "Listen, guy, I'm really sorry. Everything I could do, I talked about. What can I do?" I was going, "No, Pat, listen." And I was saying, "Pat, no, you've got to get me this gig. I mean, it's not because of the actual gig or the importance or the significance or the cachet or anything like that. It's just that I've told everyone." And then sure enough, the next night I'm in bed, it's about 4:00 in the morning, and the phone goes. I pick it up, and this voice at the end goes, "I hear you're funny, make me laugh." And it was Madonna. And I can't remember what I said, but then I got the gig. Apparently, I heard later from Pat that she was out for a walk in Malibu and bumped into Nick Kamen. who of course is Chester Kamen's brother. And she said, and there's this fucking bass player, Guy Pratt. You know, he went, yeah, I know Guy. Yeah, Guy's great. He's fantastic. He's a lovely guy. Yeah, he's brilliant. And so I think maybe Nick Kamen saved my ass on that.
Ah.
So yeah, so then I get, then I went out to do the album. And, oh yeah, there's in the Wikipedia entry, it says, Madonna would often summon Guy to the studio for his opinion and then dismiss him. It was like, no, the thing is, the first day I got there, I was summoned to the studio, and she just went, oh, nice to meet you, thanks for coming, and was a bit catty, and then I left. But it's like, that's all. I wasn't... and the first few, Like a Prayer, I think, was the last thing we did, because I played on, and all the other stuff was just band in a room, right, which was amazing. It's Sugarfoot Moffat on drums, Bruce Gage on guitar, wonderful guitar player, Jay Winding and Pat Leonard playing keyboards, and me. And we all sat there and we all had our charts. And Madonna would stand in the control room and she'd do a guide vocal as we played. And she would give everyone notes straight away. And they'd all be fucking perfect, spot on. You know, she was amazing like that, like really, really impressive. You also had to be really cheeky to her. Because she would slap you down. And so you had, something I realised, because you had all these musicians were going, yes man, no man. So you had to stand, I mean, Chester got on really well. Because, Chester Kamen was brought out as well. That guitar at the very, very beginning of Like a Prayer, which everyone says is Prince, that's Chester, by the way. And he bought her a whip as a present.
Nice one.
But
she probably appreciated that. Like, she probably appreciated, all right, they can handle me. We can actually have a bit of banter.
No, but that's it, exactly. That's, I think, yeah. I think that might have been part of Pat's sort of producer psychology, that rather than just having the super hot LA players, was that it would, a bit of English cheekiness wouldn't go amiss, the slight sort of punky thing that we bring, because we're just not those guys. We didn't go to Berkeley. We didn't grow up like them. So, but yes, but the actual song, I mean, like I said, the thing is, I know it was just me and Madonna in the studio. They'd done the track because there's that synth bass that does it. So they'd recorded the track. I don't remember being there for when they recorded the track. I might be. I don't. But it's really weird. Don't quite remember. I do remember being there for an afternoon, and I'm sure I was just messing about when we did the middle bit. I'm sure I was just messing about, and it's just like, yeah, right, as if they'd use that, and forgot about it. And I was so convinced they wouldn't use it. I'm sure I thought at the time, Pat was like, I've got this crazy idea. Why don't we just get Guy and let him go nuts? And I was like, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. And I'm sure it was just like, because there were probably other times we did that. Sure, there's other things where it's just like, let's just let Guy go nuts. And they went, nah, it didn't work. And so I was just assuming this was one of those, And like I said, it wasn't until I came back months later to start Toy Matinee, the other project I'm incredibly proud of, which is the thing I did with Pat Leonard. And Madonna heard I was in town and invited me to the mix, which I was amazed. So, and she invited me to this other studio. And I was literally, come sit here, Guy. Went and sat next to her on the sofa, and they just finished the mix, so they just did this one really loud playback of Like a Prayer, and I was like, holy fuck. And it was that thing of it's like, that sounds like me. But it can't be. It's like, because Pino gets to do that, Tony Levin gets to do that, I don't get to do that. Do you know what I mean? I'm not allowed. That's way above my pay grade. I don't get allowed to do that shit. And so I thought, well, it sounds like me, but I guess they got someone else in, Tony or someone. And at the end, so I said, quite genuinely, absolutely genuinely, I said, that is the best thing I've ever heard of yours. I think it's one of the best pop records I've ever heard. And that bass at the end, in the middle, is insane. Who did that? Said, you dummy! And the thing that was lovely was I loved when it came out. Was how all the people, I think what kind of probably meant the most to me than anything was I was still in LA when it came out. And David Gilmour called me up and said, I just heard you on the radio. I went, oh, you knew that was me? I went, of course it's you. And I was like, yeah, come on. That was really nice.
Yeah, man. The signature Pratt sound.
Yeah. I always say, it's not, I mean, I feel a bit unfair that being a signature sound. It's actually not, it's not I'm not really the same, but I always say that I basically got my whole 80s shtick from Tear Your Playhouse Down by Pino. That's where I got the idea for the octave pedal. But
Right.
yeah, it's still.
Is it true that she used to? Is it true that she used to like flash you guys in the control room?
She did once. She did, yeah, but she did actually have a bra on. Yeah, it was like Sugarfoot was going. Where do we come in for this? You come in when I do this. And he went, yeah, still don't know when we come in.
So she sounds like she's a bit of crack, like a hard
She
nut, but
was.
a bit of
She
crack.
was. She really was. She was great. Although she was going through, she was going through a lot at the time. She was, marriage was falling apart and everything. And so there was the thing. She took me out one night. She took me to see George Michael at the Faith gig. And this was George Michael at the height of his powers. We walked in the back, arm in arm. Not one fucking photographer. I know, heartbreak. But there was one incredibly poignant, and this is actually quite timely because now with It's a Sin being out and everything, which I haven't watched yet, so maybe a bit. But I said to her in the limo, "What's it? I mean, how are you finding living in LA? You strike me as such a New York person, because she's such a she's very, she's an inherently New York. She was then." Person. She said, "I hate it, but I can't live in New York." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because all my friends are dead."
Oh fuck!
And it's which is true, and you forget because of course all her friends were dancers, and AIDS just fucking forget how it was awful that was.
Yeah.
And that was really very, very touching.
Oh man. So after Madonna, like what led then to the infamous Michael Jackson sesh?
He heard Like a Prayer. I mean, I was okay. So again, things were still pretty nuts, right? I did the Madonna record. I remember by that time before, I kept flying backwards and forwards to LA. I did an album for an old bandmate of mine, Andy Kunter from Ice House, and then there was another couple of things with Pat. Then I did the Toy Matinee project, the band, which was with Pat and Kevin Gilbert, Tim Pierce, and Brian McLeod, which actually then went on to give birth to Sheryl Crow. The Tuesday Night Music Club came out of Toy Matinee. If you don't know the Toy Matinee album, you should check it out. It's the best bass playing I've ever done. And
Right, I'll
in
check it out,
America,
definitely.
I get so much kudos from American musicians, more than anything I've done. It's my Velvet Underground album. Only 300 people bought it, but they all started a band. I mean, when I met the guys who worked with Dre and the guys from Beck's band, they're all just like, "Whoa, Guy Pratt, Toy Matinee, fucking A, man." Whereas in England, no one knows it at all. But you should see on my Lockdown Licks, I do a few of the songs, and it's the best bass playing I've ever done.
I'll check it out.
But that was with
sure.
Pat, yeah. So I did that, the Toy Matinee album, and then it was straight back out with Pink Floyd for the European tour when we did the Venice show and went to Russia, which was nuts. And then I came straight back to LA again, without going for a holiday or rehab, to do the Robbie Robertson album. So what the fuck? And that really was, it's like, and I'm still going, I don't live here. How, my imposter syndrome was through the roof. And that was 2-3 months. And it was while I was doing that, I remember, because Bill Bottrell, who engineered all the Madonna stuff and then produced the Toy Matinee album, was producing Michael Jackson at that point. And Michael heard Like a Prayer and loved the bass and said, "I'd really like that on my next record." So, and he said, "Well, this guy, he's in town, I'll get him down." And it was just probably the coolest phone call. And he called me, I was at Village Recorders, and I literally had to say, "Well, let me see." So I had to turn to Robbie Robertson and go, "Robbie, is it okay if I leave early this evening? Because I've got a Michael Jackson session." And Robbie was just like, "What am I supposed to say to that?" So, yeah, that's how that came about.
Yeah. Now that is a hilarious story in itself. There.
That is a
whole
hilarious
Michael
story. And
Jackson
it's,
sesh.
yes. Oh, God. Do I have to tell it again?
Go on, guy.
All right, so I kept going to the studio and it'd be like, and Michael's never there. Michael had always just left. And Bill would go, "Well, listen, Michael liked that. He didn't like that. Why don't we try this? Da, da, da." I go, "All right, come back tomorrow and Michael will be here." So I come back the next day. Michael's just left. He's always just left. "You like this, didn't like that?" So eventually I went, "Look, Bill, if Michael could be here, tell me what he wants. I'll do it. We can all go home, right?" He goes, "Yeah, no, I know, guy. It's frustrating, I know, but I can't sign it off without him." And so the next day I get a call at the studio. "Guys, it's Bill. Michael's here. He's not leaving." I rush down the studio, and Michael's just left. But it's weird. There's this weird, different vibe in the studio. There's this new engineer, and I say engineer in inverted commas, because this guy was a giant Samoan bloke, someone who'd be better suited to being, I don't know, a bodyguard perhaps. And he's down one end of the mixing desk, and he won't let me get down. I'm trying to get an ashtray or something. You could smoke in the studios then. I'm trying to get an ashtray or something. This guy's blocking my way. I'm like, all right. So I start playing, and then this guy leans over. Yeah, I think Michael will find that appropriate. Okay, that's odd. So this bloke who has the most tenuous grasp of the English language, but an absolutely intrinsic understanding of what Michael Jackson requires from a bass performance. I think that's odd. All right, hang on a minute. Someone is hiding behind the mixing desk telling this guy what to tell me. Michael Jackson is hiding behind the mixing desk, telling this guy what to tell me. All right, this is fucking nuts. So I look around, and Bill is literally just going, "Don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me." Everyone in the room knows, but no one can do anything. So I'm not going to bother doing the gag. The gag I usually do is I play the theme from Workers' Playtime, because I just tried to think what was the most absurd thing I could possibly play. But then the funny thing about that is, and again, then that song didn't come out on his next album. Didn't come out for like another 3 or 4 years, so I'd completely forgotten about it. And it was funny because I didn't get paid for it. I was actually working illegally, so there's nothing I could do about it. But when it became a hit, I actually quite liked that, because of course this is at the time when Michael Jackson was literally the biggest pop star in the world, right? You could be anywhere on earth and Michael Jackson would come up in conversation, right? You could be talking to Maasai tribesmen in Kenya and Michael Jackson could quite easily come up in the conversation. And it was actually really nice to be able to go, yeah, can't owes me money.
Brilliant. That's a brilliant story. Fantastic bass line. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I know, it's funny. I was never quite sure. Again, it sounds to me, I mean, it's clearly what it, I think the way I described it when I did Lockdown Licks is it's, because to me it always sounds like I just hear this kind of punk rock imposter standing in, but it's a bit like some fabulous, I mean, because when you listen, especially on headphones, it's billion-dollar production. I mean, it is so perfect. The sound is incredible. And then suddenly this, especially actually when I was working, I realised how low it is. It's A flat, man. You do not want to play A flat on an octave pedal. The bottom line. How I got away with it. I was willing that OC2 to track. Come on, stay with it. That's why you can always hear the relief in my voice when it changes key to B flat. Something slightly better. But I think the way I look at that bass line now is that it's like there's some beautiful swanky drinks party, reception thing at the biggest poshest hotel in the world, and it's just gorgeous and swanky, but it's in danger of getting a bit boring. And then suddenly, like, Ollie Reed or Keith Moon comes crashing through the door, and they're pissed, and they're like being a nightmare, but they're exactly what the party needs. That's how I think of that.
That is a brilliant description of it, because it does have that vibe, because it is all very loud. Look at the trees.
And suddenly there's like, right, what's going on?
A bit of badass factor comes in, and it's like, yeah.
I know, because again, it's one of those things where I was clearly and it was like, if it was Like a Prayer that got me in there, and I'm thinking, okay, it's going to go, it's loads of and then you're confronted with that. It's like, I don't know. And so I can't remember how quickly I came up with that, and I also don't know how much Bill had to do with the input of that. Because it's really, I mean, it is actually quite risky what I did, really. I mean, it's so simple. I mean, it's smoke on the water, practically, isn't it?
But that's what makes it badass.
Yeah.
It's got riff vibes, like rock riff vibes.
Yeah. But no, but I also, no, because I really appreciate it, because there's lots of people who don't know I played it, who've said it, and it tends to be real musos who go the bass line on that record. It's really not, I mean, there's times where you play something you think is really good and you like it, whatever, and there's times you play something that's really right, whether you know it or not, and that clearly is really right, because it's really sticks with people. Everyone, it's one. There are some songs, because I know that if you mention that song to people. You know, because people always have to have a monophonic thing they can remember from a song. You know, when you want to sing something, you've got to know something monophonic. And if you mention that, what about something? And people go, oh yeah, dum dum dum. So you know, so that
Yeah,
I
it
like
makes
that.
the song.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what was it like then getting the Floyd gig? Like, how did that
Oh, it's all
transpire?
right. I know people say, oh, it's all right. Well, that was because I knew David mainly through Dream Academy. From I say I knew them. We supported him on his solo tour in Birmingham, and Nick Laird Clues, who's the most incredibly enthusiastic person, was, "Guy, you've got David loves your playing. You can't wait to," which translates as he probably heard something and said, "Oh, my bass is all right." And so we went up and he said, David's dying to meet you. He can't wait to meet you. It's fantastic. He thinks you're great. Which, of course, is the last thing I need to hear. So I'm like, oh, God. And I get introduced to David in the dressing room backstage at the Birmingham Odeon. And we just both stand, because David's really not the most talkative person in the world at the best of times. And we both just stand there until it's so awful, one of us has to walk away. And being the ranking officer, David got to that. He literally just turned and walked off. I just couldn't think of anything. And then the next time I met him was we were both in the video for Is Your Love Strong Enough, the Bryan Ferry song. And it was quite funny because this is when David wasn't really doing much, and more to the point, so Phil Taylor, his guitar tech, was terrible. He was always looking for things to do. So even though we're both just miming in this video, we're at some film studio in Fulham. And so, of course, Phil has brought down 30 guitars for David. So, like, when you're sitting in the dressing room, you're having to wade through this forest of 30 guitars, all of which are absolutely priceless, you know, just to sit down. And I'm sat there, and there's David sat opposite me, and he's noodling on this sort of white Strat that's not plugged in. And I'm sitting there going, oh, God, you've got to fucking say something at some point. And so I went, that's a nice-looking Strat, David. Is it very old? And he just went, there aren't any older than this. Flips it over. There's the nameplate. 0001. It's like, oh, for fuck's sake!
Whoa.
So, so I'd always had disastrous encounters, but apparently he'd clearly liked the cut of my jib. So I then went on holiday to Thailand, and this was back in the days of answer phones. While I was away, David was doing this Amnesty International, Secret Policeman's Ball gig with Kate Bush, and wanted me to play with it. And he left me all his messages. So I get back from this holiday, and there's all these messages from David saying, do you want to come and do this gig? And then eventually, all right, we're clearly not there. And I was like, no, no. It's like, that was my one fucking chance to ever play with David Gilmour and Kate Bush. And I've blown it. And, but then funny enough, then literally, and I started bumping into him at parties and stuff. And then about 2-3, then I saw this thing in Q magazine, which was a new magazine at that time, about them getting back together and going out on the road. And I thought, oh wow, that'll be something. And then thought no more of it. And the next thing I know, David calls me up and just says, hi, guys, it's David. He was in LA at the time. And brilliant, classic David, right? And this has never stopped. He's always been able to bait me really easily, which he does fantastically. And he just said, Guy, look, 2 questions for you. I don't know if we're getting Floyd back together. I said, oh, yeah, I saw something about that. He said, yeah, we're going on tour for a year. So 2 questions, really. Are you interested and are you available? I went, oh, I could possibly muster some interest. And, yeah, I'm available. I went, oh, not working then. No, obviously I'd have to move things around and literally, it started with a fucking dig, and it's never changed.
Oh, that's brilliant. So what was it like going into like rehearsals with the legendary band,
It was a nightmare, because David wasn't even there for the first week or so. And I was really intimidated because there was like Tim Rennick and Gary Wallace, and they were from this very different. Tim I knew, I had some history with, and I loved Tim. And there's Gary Wallace, who's from the super muso world, and so I had that terrible thing where, because everyone was like into their fusion and to Yellow Jackets and stuff like that, and I thought that was who you were meant to be. Whereas in fact, that's actually not what you need to play with Pink Floyd at all. And it was, actually. Where I come from is exactly who you need to be to play Pink Floyd, frankly. But I thought I was very intimidated by them because I wasn't this muso, Although there was John, who was very much John Caron, who was very much a like mind at the time, and but it was just a mess. It was just a sort of mess. No one really knew the stuff, and you know, Nick certainly wasn't really interested in being a band. Nick was doing anything to be involved in the logistics rather than sitting behind the drums. He was always kind of putting it off. And we had this joke about it. It would literally be, you'd have runners everywhere going, "Hi, listen, I'm just going to the music shop. Does anyone need anything?" People go, "Oh yeah, actually, I could do some batteries. I could do it." And Nick would always go, "Are you going to the stationers at all?" He was like, "I could do some folders." And then David turned up, and again, he wasn't really that interested in being a band leader, and this thing was huge. You know, it was a huge undertaking. And then luckily, Bob Ezrin was brought in to produce, to kind of pull, and he pulled everything together. Because Bob's a very fantastically theatrical character, and he's lots of shouting and pointing, and you know, and it was brilliant. I felt very at home with him because he was, you know, because I'm quite a theatrical type, you know, and. Well, the scariest bit was at one point, I remember he stopped the song and said, "Okay, if anyone's ever lost, if you're confused or lost, look at Guy. Guy always knows what's going on." I'm like, "What? No, not me." But yeah, off it went, and you know, and you know, evolved into, I mean, an amazing show. Well, it's funny now. The '94 tour is a much better, I think. Much better document, is a much better band, because it wasn't as much fun. The 87, 89 stuff was so much fun, and it was, we were all being way too 80s. But now I think about it, actually wasn't just us being 80s, actually everyone was, you know, it was the 80s. And so, you know, David was being 80s, you know, everything about it was 80s. So I'm bored of carrying the can for that. I did a bit of slapping. That was my contribution to the 80s-ness of it, but everyone was being fucking 80s. You know? And, well, the funny thing is, and for years I was so embarrassed about my bass solo and money, and then of course, but now it's been cut from the later years box set, and obviously I'm incandescent with rage at that.
Oh,
I know.
that's a controversy. That's awful.
I can kind of see why David did, but it's a bit silly because, like, yes, it is too long, and but it's like, but you know what? If it's either it's a document of what happened or it isn't. Make your mind up. You know, I don't think anyone's going to not listen to it, but you know, it doesn't. But whatever. I just
still
don't really
knocking
care
about
that
on
much.
YouTube, is it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because it's the bass solo that everyone likes to learn is the Venice one, which when I did my lockdown licks, I looked at that and I was like, I can't be bothered. Because it's really interesting because we've been on the road. You know, we've done the 13-month tour, had the break, and then we've been on the road for another 2 months then. And so, and it's that wonderful thing when you've been on tour that long, where you haven't done any practice or any thinking about it, but you're just, you know, your chops are just there. You know, it's brilliant. I mean, it's really funny. It's like kind of, if this is the level of your playing, you just automatically go up to here, and then you come home and you go back down to there. You know, and it's nothing to do with practice. It's not. Well, it is. I mean, if you played for 3 hours every day, then obviously that's where you'd be. But I don't do that. Yeah, no, so I've liked doing my lockdown licks thing, because that's really been what's been really been fun for me. Is what's interesting is everything from about from like 87, from my Pink Floyd period onwards. Anything I've had learned, it has been really fun, because you pick up the bass and go, "Oh, that guy. Oh yeah, that guy. I remember that guy. Yeah, that guy. He's all right. Yeah, I know that guy." But then anything before that, like when I've done Ice House songs, and it's just like, "Oh, this guy." Who's this guy? It's like, "Oh, well, he's the guy who was trying to figure out how to become that guy," and it's really nice. And it's like having a conversation with a younger you, because you know, it's like, "This is what you did." It's like, of course, but I wouldn't do that now because I'm not him. That's actually a really nice. It's a really nice way of communicating with your younger self, if you know what I mean, rather than traumatic therapy.
Okay, you're primarily self-taught then, right? So, like,
Yeah.
Did you ever learn to read or do any studying?
No, I didn't. And you know what? Now, I mean, for instance, why didn't I during lockdown? Why the fuck didn't I learn to read? It's because it used to be a badge of honor. It used to be this real part. Yeah, I don't need any of that. And now we get here and it's just lazy, because especially when occasionally there's, you know, quite complicated things that I want to learn, and I have to work it out. But I think if you could read this, it'll take you a second. But there's something about I'm now just too set in my same way. You know, it's like learning chess. I really should learn chess, but but the funny thing is, I can't remember how I learnt. I can't remember what I did to teach myself the bass. I know I just played all the time, and everyone I was at school with, you know, everyone says, "We remember you, man. You just played the bass all the time. That's all you did. You were playing bass." But I don't know what I was playing, because I got this weird thing into my head, right? Really stupid, that I didn't want to learn other people's bass lines. because if I figured that, if I did that, then I'd just sound like other people. Which is really, it's just like, well, it just means you don't have to fucking play anything, you idiot. So I don't know what so I basically was just making up bass lines. And then one day I figured out, I just went, and I remember the first time I slapped, because it's like the thing all these amazing musicians did. And I remember the first time I slapped, I remember thinking, is it that easy? I remember thinking, surely it's got to be more different. Surely I can't do that. It can't be. I mean, I've never been great at it, and then, you just pick things up, and I mean, my real lessons were, I had this great. I moved into a house in Queen's Park with a really dear friend of mine, this guy called Andrew Crawford, who sadly took his own life years later, and he was this fantastic kind of jazz funk pianist. We used to smoke a lot of weed, and we had this lovely big front room overlooking the park with a grand piano in it, and I had this tiny little box drum machine that went, and I had a little amp, and we would just get stoned and just play and write these sort of jazz, funk and reggae tunes and just play all day, every day. And that was sort of my conservatory, really. That's where I learned, and it was and I literally I just messed about. But I messed about for 8-9 hours every day. And then I started learning disco stuff, because that was, one day I went, hang on, this is this is amazing. In fact, no, it was I worked at this clothes shop called Risk. It was a really cool second-hand clothes shop on Portobello Road, and JC from the Members was working there part-time as well. And one day he gave me "I Should Have Loved You" by Narada Michael Walden. Said, you learn to play bass like that and I'll start a band with you. And so I thought, all right. And I went home and I learned that bass line, and he did actually start a band. That's how we started the Children of Seven. But it was like, that was one of the first times I actually just sat down to learn a line. I was just like, oh my God, this is incredible, So.
But what about like theory, like arpeggio scales and all that? Did that come later? Was that you picked that up?
Yeah, okay. No, I've never really done scale practice. That's why, I mean, I can get from one end of the neck to the other, but I don't really know how. I don't do. I notice that when I'm paying attention, I notice that my fingering is like I use all of my fingers. But when I'm in a live situation, I know whenever if I'm doing any sort of solos or anything mad stuff, it's literally just first, second, third. I notice I'm really lazy. It tends to be just first and third fingers. All my theory stuff goes out the window. But I mean, I don't really have theories, but I do it because I love what makes bass play. Actually, where I learnt most of, or got an understanding of sort of theory, was actually from listening to Led Zeppelin more than anything, because John Paul Jones's sense of he's playing harmony a lot of the time, and that's why I learnt from him that thing of you can really strengthen the roots of a piece by not playing them, by don't be afraid of thirds.
Yeah.
And nines and stuff.
Oh yeah, there's another one of my heroes, JPJ.
Same birthday.
No way.
Yeah.
Have you ever met him?
I have. I met him once backstage at the Albert Hall, which didn't go very well because it was when I was working with Jimmy Page, and he wasn't very happy about that. But then, funny enough, I did my stand-up in Ireland at a literary festival a couple of years back. I can't remember what it was called. Brilliant little festival. Margaret Atwood was there, and John Paul Jones was there talking about his new opera, and I got to hang with him a bit there. In fact, we jammed with a load of Irish musicians one night in the beer tent, which is great. And he got the mandolin out. He got that, and it's like, oh my God! It literally just was that. It was that. It was what's the song? Battle Forevermore. It was literally it just sounded like that. And he's charming, delightful man.
What would be your advice for bass players these days, like if they want to do well in the industry?
I can't give any professional advice because I don't really because I don't know how the music business works anymore, and it's I don't. I mean, for instance, like the career I had doesn't exist. I just don't think it really exists. I mean, there's lots of playing gigs. There's certainly lots of live work and stuff. And the thing is, what I would say is that I heard. I mean, because I just had this terrible thing of I didn't realise that when you're hired as a musician, your job is to be a professional and sort of perform to the best of your abilities and sort of follow the rules. Whereas I always thought I'd just been asked to join a gang. As long as I showed up, got the gig right, then we're all just mates and having a laugh, But I do, and I think which worked for me, but I not necessarily going to work for everyone. But the thing is, and I do think today people can err a bit too far the other way. Can be a bit too grown up and professional,
Bit
so
boring.
my message to anyone would be, my message to everyone was, yes, always be professional and everything, but also remember it's art. You know, remember it is art. Remember, you know, you need to be. You're a creative person.
Yeah, I've noticed that actually, like in some of the you know, musical institutes that are around. I remember when I went to do my degree, because I want to be a session player, like my heroes, you, John Paul Jones, right? And like I was like, so I went to this place, and I always thought in my mind, well, those session players are getting chosen because of how they play. They sound like them. Tony Levin sounds like Tony Levin. Pino sounds like Pino. You sound like you. Right. That's so. Where's my voice, kind of thing? You know what I mean? Obviously, your influences come out in you, right? But
Yeah.
still going to be you, right? But in these institutes, I kind of find that they try to wring that out of you. I noticed. I remember like being in classes, like, right, you have to sound like Marcus Miller this week, and I'm like, well, I'm not ever going to sound exactly like Marcus Miller because I'm a little white Irish girl. You know what I mean? Come on. I'm not going to sound like Chuck Rainey.
Yeah, but yes. No, well, also what you got to remember, but because what I'm talking about is actually in terms of the work I've done. Right, most of my sessions don't cover any of this at all. 9 times out of 10, right, most sessions you do, certainly on records, or is it is stuff that anyone could do, and they're not necessarily looking for your personality or anyone. They're just looking. My case, if I'm, I think a lot of it was. You've got a song, anyone could play bass on it and go, well, we could get him, we could get him, we could get Guy. He's a laugh. Let's get Guy. Because it doesn't really matter who's playing bass on it. So be the person people want to have around, you know, is, I would say, is as important as anything. Because there's a load of records I'm on that you would have no idea it's me, because it doesn't sound like me. And and also I don't care enough about it to bring myself to it. Do you know what I mean? Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't need it. It's actually really great and quite rare when people ask me to bring me to the table. Do you know what I mean? It's like Pat Leonard, or very much he wants Guy Pratt in the room. That's why he gets me. So, but not everyone does that. You know, a lot of the time people do just want a job done. So,
yeah, and you have to serve the song and just do what's right.
Serve the song, do what's right. Yeah, sometimes don't. There are times when. Because that's the funny thing. I remember I once came out with this great maxim for a great bass player is like a great waiter. You don't know they're there. Shit just gets done. And I suddenly realised that's bollocks, right? Because that's utterly... Yes, there's a lot of songs where that really is the case, where you really don't, where you need to just be helping the song along. And there's a lot of times where it's just like, frankly, this song is great because the bass player just turned up and kicked the shit out of it. So there is no absolute for that.
Yeah. Well, that actually brings me to another little point that's on the... it's a Dahi Gilmour quote, Bass players are 10 a penny, but a good wit is hard to find, so we hired them.
Okay, yeah. Do you know what's funny and sweet? And also slightly... Right, here's the thing with that quote. Is that was when I first started doing my stand-up. And so I thought, I need all the help I can get. So I said, David, would you mind giving me a coat? He went, yeah, sure. And he gave me that. Now, the thing is, there's a story behind that. This is something I've had to fucking suffer with David for years. When Pink Floyd first had their schism and David and Roger went their separate ways, Roger did an interview and he was asked, so, how are you going to find it working without David? And he said, well, guitarists are 10 a penny. Now, that is true. Guitarists are 10 a penny. David Gilmour's really are not 10 a penny, right? That clearly rankled David, okay? And it kind of stayed with him forever. So all the time, for years, I had to put up with David saying, well, bass players are 10 a penny. That's it. So when I turned to him for a quote and a bit of help, and he says this lovely thing, but he still has to get in. Still, it's like you wouldn't let it lie, would you? He still has to get in that bass players are 10 a penny. So that's actually the story behind that.
Yeah, but it is exactly what you said as well about like being a bit of crack to have around, because I know there's some gigs I've gotten and it's like, oh, we'll get Ellen, she's a bit of a laugh, as well. So
yeah, no, exactly. You absolutely. Well, you're like me. You do stand up very, very well, I should say. It's very, very funny. You should check her out if you haven't.
Thank you.
And that's what I think. But also because bass players have this image of being sort of dull, quiet, which is very often true, but it's very often not. It's very often that. In my case, and probably yours, is that because you're quite an exuberant person, you know, you're taking care of that in your life. You don't need to bring that, you know, maybe to your music. You want to bring something else. You know, that's where it's nice to you know, the great thing with the bass players is it's the fact that it's really not all about you. It really is all about, you know, serving the whole. And that's a really nice place to be. You are the least audible of any member of the band. If there's someone who's at a gig because they have a vague interest in music and they like this song and they like that song, you know, 9 times out of 10 they don't even know what bits you're playing, and you've got to be cool with that. You know, you need to be cool with that.
Just be happy to be there, lads.
Exactly.
Did you ever get any, you know, I mean, when you go into a big band like Floyd, and Roger Waters, all his lines are there, like, were the rest of the band cool with where you were taking it musically? Like, because it sounds like
that never really came up at all. And I had this weird thing, and that I felt I had a duty of care to it, but then at the same time, I really wasn't. As I've got older, I've got much better. I mean, like, by the time of the last Gilmour tour, I'm just playing all of it on a precision with a pick, you know. Forget. And when you kind of think, when I look at it now, that 87 tour, I had all wrong basses. They were all wrong. Music Man, Spectre, even Betsy, all wrong. They were all the wrong basses. You know, I wasn't really, but that's because I was just so excited to be given all these basses. It's simple as that. It's like I can play. I should really play this on a precision, but they've just given me 3 Spectres. So, you know, that's kind of what that was about. And I don't think it really matters. You know, you can get hung up on stuff that really doesn't matter. I mean, it's interesting stuff when you see the Stones. One of the things I find interesting about the Stones is that Keith and Ronnie always make these very, very specific and utterly baffling guitar choices on all the way through Stone shows. It's like, yeah, this one I'm going to play Satisfaction on a 1978 G&L because. So, you know, but does it really matter? No. You know, because the record is the record, and you know, when you're playing live, you're making that statement now. With the Saucers, obviously, I try, you know, I play a precision and I play a Rickenbacker because it's, you know, that you're looking for more of an authenticity thing there. But to answer your question, I mean, no. What David has this really annoying thing where, for instance, I remember watching the first rough cut of Pulse with him, and we're watching High Hopes, and in the last verse of High Hopes, there's this one little fill that I've added, right, where it just goes, that's all, really simple thing. And Dave, and every night I'd done it for half the tour, and just, I hope that's all right. And then David said, oh yeah, no, I really like that. I love it when you do that. It's like, you could have told me that. You could have told me that right there, and I wouldn't have had to spend months worrying about it every night, you know. Or the other thing, or he'll then go, yeah, no, I never really liked that. It's like, well, why? If you told me, I would have stopped doing it.
But yeah, you mentioned Nick Mason's Saucer Full of Secrets there.
Yes.
Is that DVD's out and stuff?
Yes, and it's streaming. Yeah, and well, that's what I would have been doing a year ago, you know. And we've cancelled and rebooked and cancelled and rebooked and cancelled and rebooked. And annoyingly, I think as far the one thing that didn't survive the rebooking was Dublin. I don't think we've managed to rebook it, but I'm not sure. I mean, there's still a long time before we get to play it, so hopefully that is going to come back. But yeah, that's the most fun thing ever, because it's like, because I've only ever played 3 of these songs before, right, and half of them have actually never been played before, so it's like being in a new band. It feels really fresh, and the fact that, like, we don't have to be reverent to it. It's that lovely thing of, you know, there was a time that Pink Floyd were a pop group, you know, before they were this huge obelisk of kind of, you know, and it's suddenly just not that important, you know. We can take liberties, you can muck about, you can talk to the audience, you can, you know, and it's brilliant. That's the thing of rather with Pink Floyd, where you're looking at or with David, you know, with David's gigs, you have an audience going, oh my God, it's so great that I got to hear this live. And whereas with the Saucers, you look at an audience who go, I was never going to hear this live. This is amazing. I never ever thought I would hear Vegetable Man played live, you know. And so that is fantastic. Plus I'm fronting it, you know, with my best mate, Gary Kemp. We have it's so fun, and it's and it's really, really hard work. Well, that's what's really nice, because it's a band, everyone has a stake, everyone's involved. So and you literally just get on the bus, and we gig we do four nights in a row, traveling every day, sleeping on a tour bus. So and Nick is amazing. I mean, Gary and I get much more queenie about the hotels than he does. It's he's loving it.
So when do we think you'll be out again? Like, I mean, there's light at the end of the tunnel.
I can't say what's that. Well, there's the UK next year, and then there'll be Europe and everything. And America. It's not for me to say right now, other than whatever's been announced, and I can't remember what's been announced at the moment. That's a really funny thing. That's a really funny thing, because I that's one thing I hate on social media. People go, "Hey guys, so when's David Gilmour touring?" It's like, yeah, because that's how they're announced. A random person asks me on Twitter, and I tell them.
Yeah. Well, look, just keep an eye on guypratt.com, lads, in the future.
I don't know if that site's live. It might be live. I don't know. But yeah, my YouTube channel for bass players. Then definitely you want to go to my Guy Pratt YouTube channel for my lockdown licks, which is me breaking down sort of my greatest hits in an incredibly non-muso and dismissive way. Yes, and listen to Rock on Tours wherever you get your podcasts, because they really are good fun.
And also, delving into the past, if anyone has never read this book, you need to read this bloody book. It's absolutely hilarious. I've actually got like 3 copies, one of which is signed by you, and one you signed from our brother.
Oh, isn't that nice? And a rare unsigned copy.
Yeah, I don't know where that is. My ex has that.
Yes. It's still available. It's on Amazon. Apparently it's still available. Still in print after all these years. Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I still haven't turned a profit on it. I'm still paying off my advance. It wasn't even that big. I don't understand. I clearly signed the worst publishing deal in history.
Yeah, because it is hilarious. It's brilliant. I mean, like the Jimmy Page, it's full of mad stories, like Jimmy Page stories, like obviously the Madonna one, Michael Jackson one we heard. Amongst others, Crosby, Stills and Nash, all that crack. It's absolutely hilarious. And the story about how you met the love of your life, Betsy.
Yes, indeed. Betsy, yes. Do you want to see it?
Tell us about Betsy. Yeah. She's a beaut. I love the fact that your lover she's pink and mine's blue, It's like
What's yours called?
I don't know. I need to come up with a name.
Have you seen the Rock on Tours episode with Johnny Marr?
No, I'll check it out.
You need to, because it has the full story of Betsy on it. The never before told full story of Betsy. It's brilliant.
Right. Is that means that you're not going to tell us here now?
No, I'm not. No, because Johnny has to tell it. It's brilliant, and Johnny tells it. So it's fantastic, and this is for the first time since 1987. The story is finally it's not 1987. It was actually about 1993. That's actually when Betsy got her name.
Just one more question.
All right.
But back when you were doing like a stand-up, did you ever get any stick for all the stories you told about all the famous heads, like Dave? David.
No, that's the funny thing is that because no, I was always quite careful about the stories I told, in that I kind of. I mean, they were, because the only person who really comes out of it looking a twat is me. And even like the stuff about David Coverdale was, where I do that in a very camp way, but that was incredibly affectionate. And we had David on Rock on Tours, and he was brilliant. And you suddenly go, yeah, that's why, he is that guy, and he's amazing and so adorable. So no, I didn't. The funny thing was that when I did my second show, when I did this completely fresh show once, which was Guy Pratt's Wake Up Call, and when I did my first preview, and I suddenly thought, you tell all these stories about David, and he's your mate, and he's your kind of mentor, and it's probably best, you don't, So I left him out of the show completely, and David came to the first preview, and I could see he was clearly upset. So, but no, because they're all affectionate, and it's it's the old Oscar Wilde, isn't it? It's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about.
That's it, yeah, that's it. I've nothing to declare but my genius. That's another good one. Completely unrelated, but I had to throw it in. Well, I've held you up long enough. Thanks so much, Guy, for joining us today.
At all. It's always a delight to speak to you, Ellen.
No problem. Thank you very much.